Okay, everybody sitting comfortably? Thank you very much. Hopefully you all had a great session before lunch. So much to digest. It's okay, I'm going to give you another 4 weeks off before you have to go back to your schools, all right? They've all agreed. This is the last time we're together, because after this we go for our final session in various places. So this is the final session that we're together, so we're going to make it bloody good, all right? And we've got 5 people on our panel for our conversation around school leaders, innovation in schools. And let me introduce you to them. We'll start from this end. We've got Nicole West. I'm going to see what I'm reading. Nicole West, Deputy Principal with Beaumaris Primary School. Stella Jinman is Principal with Cecil Andrews College. Then we've got Lisa Criddle, Principal with Allendale Primary School. We've got Lynne Herbert, who's a Deputy Principal with Merredin College. And Keren Caple, who's the CEO Innovation Unit with the ANZ. Okay, so let's give them a big clap. So I'm going to go right into the middle rather than starting at an end, just because it's all about innovation and doing things differently. So let me ask you, if I possibly can, Lisa, about what you would consider the most important condition that you've put in place to enable innovation to flourish in your school. The most, what would it be?
Thanks, James. I think for us, it's the concept of teams. We did some work with Simon Breakspear not long ago at a WAPA conference, and his message was about creating the team. So we call ourselves the A-team, A for Allendale, and the team culture is so important to be able to lead innovation. We've got a connected team, a team of 4. That team have worked really hard over the last 2 years as part of the project to really innovate across the school to strengthen the outcomes for Aboriginal students. But the importance of team, supporting the team, building the team, developing the team and giving the team opportunities. So for me, it's the importance of team.
So tell me why. Why has team been so important and why has it been effective?
If you don't have a connected team and a team that's strong, you can't convince and bring staff along. Mm-hmm. You know, we've got 50, 60 staff, 450 students, a low ICSIA in our school, and you need those people to be connected to each other to be able to lead others.
When I say the word innovation to you, what does it mean?
Lots of things. Case for change. Our story is about strengthening the outcomes for Aboriginal students, and the innovation in that space is about project-based learning, but also having an integrated planning tool. The integrated planning tool, which some of you may have seen on our Allendale booth the last day and a half, has inspired the staff to look at integrated planning in a different way and integrated curriculum.
Nice, thank you. Stella, what about you? What's the biggest thing for you? Who's on?
Well, first of all, there obviously is a set of conditions. However, I think in terms of schools that are innovative, and the research shows us, are those where there's an adventurous spirit. So if we are going to truly inspire the next generation and accelerate their learning in a way that's powerful and connected, then I think it's absolutely essential that we actually do have an environment where there's conditions for risk-taking and safe experimentation. Because if you can free up and empower the staff, the students, the community, the connected, engaged practice and take down the walls and barriers, then that's when you see some exceptional work coming through, and from any students. That really does not discriminate. And look, we've seen it even with English as a second language, mainly Filipino students, starting to break down barriers and to get bolder and to get a sense of agency, and then to reach across and start working with one of our most innovative engineers, Darren Lohman, coming up with a gaming concept and plastic recycling and getting into using the 3D printers and the filaments for lights, and then this whole concept of a gaming idea like Pokemon Go. So start to think cross-sector in their brains, and they start to find a sense of curiosity that's ignited.
How do they know that they're safe in being bold?
Because first of all, the teachers are role modelling this, and then we've got students who are now leading this with each other. So I think the whole thing is to empower our teachers and not to expect that they're not going to fail learning. So they have that opportunity to experiment and trial and collaborate together, and the barriers are down, they're not in silos.
And do you ever say that's a little bit risky, or is there no such thing?
Well, I have been asked the question, what's with all this innovation? Have you done a risk assessment? And I'm sorry, but off the top of my head, my first response was high risk, high reward, because you can talk to the chief scientist and he's in agreement with me that we are a risk-adverse society. And if we are going to position Australia globally to lead the way in innovation, which we truly have the potential, it's like an artesian well here, then we actually have to stop these unnecessary walls that are going to spring up and say, I can't do that, or I don't want to try that. Now, I was back to the story about those young Filipino kids who had this passion for cleaning up plastic from the Philippines and seeing what it was doing to the oceans. They were so inspired and up there that they actually went from carrying the water at the athletics carnivals to presenting on the top floor of the Mitsubishi building to the head of Mitsubishi and Lynne Beasley and Brian Pullen, the patents attorney, and Lynne Beasley, the former chief scientist. And they were finalists in the Young Innovators of the Year last year. So it just goes to show, James, that really we have low expectations that need to be lifted, and therefore we have to lift the students to give them those opportunities.
Thank you. Beautiful summary. Lynne, what about you?
I have to agree with Stella. For me, it's all about having an environment that breeds trust. So my staff have to be willing and able to take risks and know that I'm going to be supportive of them, and our whole admin team is going to be supportive of them.
How do you tell them this? What do you do? Sit them down, talk to them? How do you communicate that?
Well, it's all about giving them that opportunity to be creative and actually run with ideas and say, look, we're going to be behind you. We know that sometimes these ideas are going to fall by the wayside and it's not going to be perfect, but innovation's all about the doing. It's not about having a perfect answer. It's about actually getting involved, having a go, seeing what works, seeing what is the best possible opportunity for kids. And that's what we need to breed within our schools. We need to have teachers that are willing to be creative and able to be creative, and we need to support them in doing that, whether that be resources, whether that just be being behind them and giving them that encouragement.
Not everyone runs at the same pace, so you'll have some teachers who embrace what you're saying. There'll be others that are a little reluctant. So tell me what you do with some of those that are a little bit slower coming forward.
You know what, everybody has to work at their own pace, and we have people in schools that are absolutely going for it, and I can say that about my little TDS team that I've got running in the school. My digital technology ambassadors are just amazing, and the rest of the staff see their enthusiasm and they get pulled in. So when I was looking at my next lot of STEM group of people, I had people putting up their hand for it because they'd seen that we were supportive of them, we were going to give them the time and the effort and the energy that they needed, and we were going to back them 100% even when they fall. We were going to help them and prop them up and keep them going, because we're all in it for the kids. Teachers are all about kids. That's our primary duty, and we want to make sure that the kids are getting the best opportunities.
And how do you think the kids have fed back into that system that you've created?
Well, for us, it's about giving them a voice. At the end of the day, they are they're what it's all about. So we need to listen to them, and we need to actually have action on what they say to us.
How do they talk to you?
Well, one of the great things about the Innovation Partnership is it actually teaches you how to talk to kids and ways of gathering data, ethnographic data, giving you supports on what sort of questions to ask. And when you start to ask those questions and you start to look at case studies of individual children, then you get a much broader picture of what your school is all about. If you don't have those conversations, those one-on-one conversations with children and actually develop those case studies and stories, really we're just teaching to the masses, and we're just teaching to one group, and that's not how schools are. We have so many little groups within schools, and we need to make sure we're targeting all of them.
Fantastic, Lynne. Thank you very much. Nicole, what about you? What is your school? Would you say is the standout for you in terms of what's bred the success?
I think for us at our school, what we've really focused on is giving our teachers permission to play. So we have a play-based learning in early childhood has been quite a big focus, and we decided we would focus the innovation in the year 5 and 6 area, and we were sort of sandwiching the concept of not only giving our kids voice in innovation, but our teachers recognising that failing is a part of the process and it's an iterative cycle. We have a look at things and we manage them along the way, but we're not going to start with a perfect picture, as was said earlier. We're not going to have all the answers. That's the very definition of innovation. It's about newness. So just as the other ladies have said on the panel, that psychological safety is such a key component of the culture of your school for innovation to thrive.
Why do you think the play has worked so well?
Oh, everybody loves to play.
Yeah.
I think the concept of play, the word play can have very limited connotations, but we've worked really hard to broaden not only the teacher's understanding of playful learning, but also our community and our parents' understanding of what that looks like. And they've been able to see the re-engagement of students through the playfulness in the learning, and that's been possibly the biggest learning curve for us, is how we need to really make their voice a critical part of innovation.
Very interesting you mentioned the word parents there. So bringing the parents into this conversation, getting their buy-in, how difficult was that?
Really, it was about clear communication. So we had to make sure that when we were involved in the innovation, we had ongoing communication with our parents about what that could look like, the benefits of it. And because we started working with the students and their agency, the parents really felt that we took into account what our kids needed and we were there for them. It wasn't about us, it was about the students and how they're going to learn best.
And did they encourage this? They were excited by this? They could see the benefits?
Yes, very. And they're very excited. Our new business plan was really, it morphed from the innovation project, and I know a lot of other schools in the project were the same. It's really given us a sense of direction about moving forward and what we need to be doing as a network as well, because our project was a network one.
Nice.
So we had the complexities of not only looking at our school and what was working well, but what we were able to transfer between contexts and the similarities that we had that we could, I guess, leverage off. So that was our journey.
Terrific. Thank you very much. And finally, Keren, what are you seeing?
So I feel redundant on this panel because we've had the privilege of working with both, or the 4 school leaders that are here, but also the 40, almost 50 schools that are down in the showcase area. So I think what we've witnessed over the past 2 years is a group of people who were obviously attracted to the notion of designing better teaching, learning, schooling environments for young people, had already taken risks themselves and were already known for being innovative in their practice. And our role was to apply discipline to that, to help support and bring global thinking to that, and to really be there to help give some courage when things got a bit tough, because the schools that are both represented here, but also down the practices that are represented down in the showcase, some of those schools are challenging very, very long-held beliefs about what learning and schooling should look like. And that requires moral courage, as we talked about before. It requires system support, which, for this to be a system-supported innovation program is incredibly rare. So there's all of those conditions that these school leaders have applied in their schools, and I can, testify to each of those. But we've been able to see those replicated from a system perspective in terms of the ability for schools to take risks, to engage young people and parents in co-design learning, the kind of permissions for that. So it's been a wonderful 2-year journey to be a part of.
How quick have you seen that spreading of goodness, if that's a good way of describing it?
I don't know if Hans is here. Where is he?
Right in front of you.
Where is he? Right. So in 2016, we started working in innovation partnerships for the first time. And on workshop 2, Hans stood up and I don't know what the most polite way of saying this is, but pretty much told me that I was crap. No. That it was crap. I'm not quite sure what the... Yeah, twin brother. But it was the thought of, how could you ask us to do this in not just a West Australian education system, but in education systems that are so controlled and so confined, and performance outcomes rule the world, and schools are very busy places, and we were introducing new curriculum. How could you ask us to do all of this incredibly ambitious innovation work on top of that? And Hans has always been an amazing school leader, so it's got nothing to do with our involvement with Brookman in that case or any of the others here. But I think 3 years on, and you're the STEM Governor's Award winner, 2 years in a row, and there's numbers of schools, huge amounts of schools that are going to open days, both from a teacher perspective and a school leader perspective, to see how that happens. I think actually the journey is very, very hard for the first year, and you have to be willing to absolutely stay the course and have that courage and ambition, and then we see, as a general rule, just everyone fly as a result of that. It feels, you get wobbly. It feels like you don't really know where you're going because you're very, very open to possibilities. And I look at the 4 ladies that I'm sitting with here now, who are all amazing, accomplished school leaders in their own right. But actually, this is just another string to their bow that helps them to scale and spread their practices, so that even more young people across WA benefit from that. It's not just about the young people in their schools. And when you see the amount of effort that everyone downstairs has gone to prepare to share their practices, that's not because there's any benefit for them. Of course, they get the opportunity to learn and connect, all of those things, but it's because of a genuine desire for every young person in the state to have those kinds of learning experiences offered to them.
Thank you. That's brilliant. And I love the fact that it isn't linear. This isn't literally, all good times all the time. It gets bumpy as well. Let's just break this down a bit and look at some of the practical ways in which these processes and methods have come about. So you're holding the microphone, so perhaps, Lynne, you can start. Give the audience a sense of some sort of steps involved.
Well, I guess for us to start with, it was all about what's our case for change. So why are we doing what we're doing? We have to have a purpose to it. And so that's about, you need to start collecting some data and actually working out what areas that you want to focus on. And a lot of that comes down to that ethnographic data, that ethnographic information from children and from your staff. So you've got to have that information first up, because you don't even know where you're going until you've kind of got that information. Once you start to have that information, then it's, in this process, it was actually time to start talking with others, other schools, other school leaders, other practitioners, and just getting ideas for what you can do to kind of move forward. And once you kind of start generating those ideas, then it's actually time to have a play, and it's time to start prototyping and getting out there and having a go. And that's kind of the most rewarding part, because you do so many different things, and then you come up with something that's actually going to work in your context.
Yeah.
And then the great thing next is actually about scaling and bringing it from that small group of people maybe in your school to branching out in your school to encompass more people, and then you then get to share with others.
How did you let those ideas be, if you like, not just your ideas, the ones that you felt closest to, that it became much more than you?
One of the catchphrases that we got from the innovation team was about being in the grey. So every idea is a good idea, and it may not be the idea that you take, but it's going to be a good idea. So when you're generating ideas, you put everything on the table, and then you start sifting through as a group. And nobody is the person that's in control of it. You're all part of that process.
Yeah.
So every idea that comes down, you look at it, you analyse it, you decide whether that's what you want to do. And it may be that 2 or 3 people go off and do that idea, but somebody else goes off and does something else, and then you come back together again. Because the trials aren't going to look the same in every single classroom, because you've got different phases of development, you've got different children, even when you look at different groups coming through your school, you might have a class which is totally different in year 5, one year compared to the following year. So that's kind of the process. It's all about looking at all of the options on the table and then kind of filtering it down to the ones that actually are going to work in your context.
Very nice. Lisa, maybe progress that idea.
Very similar to Lynne. I mean, the process is the process. I remember Keren saying to us at the beginning of last year, trust the process. And I was must admit, very sceptical back then, because I'm thinking I can't see any clarity about this process at all. But and the team kept saying to me back at school, Lisa, trust the process, because I allowed them to be major leaders in the forums, to actually lead it amongst the staff. My key role as the main leader, but not directly involved with the Innovation Partnerships team, was to make sure they had the resources, the time, the support that they required. So things like being intentional about giving them time, school development days, staff meetings, weekly collaborative planning, allow them to hijack our timetable or take over some key parts of the timetable to make sure the project actually worked with our teachers. Wasn't easy, because at the same time we were running our regional teacher development school. We're a regional teacher development school in English, Maths in the early years. So this is other major vehicle going on, as well as innovation partnerships at the same time. And of course you've got a school to lead, and it's a juggling act. You've still got parent complaints, and you've got kids not coming to school, and you've got some significant issues going on in your community. So my role, I see, is critical, because you've got to make sure all those balls are being juggled well, but still encourage that team to be inspired, to inspire others, and give them the resources and the time that they need to be effective in the project. And as a result, 2 years later, We've seen the tool being produced and the collaboration that's gone on to produce it, and the work they've done, which will hopefully impact on other schools in the state, is fantastic.
Do you sense that because of your success and what you've been doing, there are others very keen to do what you're doing, but also, secondly, it's so much easier for you now that you've kind of broken through and got a model that's working?
Absolutely, and we'll be able to share that. We'll be able to share that in the Geraldton network, but also across the state. A few other schools that we've been partnered with are very keen to take on board some of the key elements of it. But like Lynne has said, the process is clear. The work that Keren has done with all the schools has been able to show us the steps involved. The other key part too was, I, as a leader, allow the team to fly. Great leaders, good leaders allow their team to fly and do what they need to do. We were able to facilitate a WAPA study grant, so WAPA, West Australian Primary Principals Association. The team applied for a study grant to go to Sydney to look at leading schools in Aboriginal education, distinctive schools. This team went over there, gleaned some amazing ideas, brought it back and put that together with the work they were doing in innovation partnerships. So it's about, allowing your team to fly and also supporting those people to do the best work they possibly can.
Lovely, thank you. Stella, what about you and the step process?
Well, for me, it's all about the design thinking, and that's so important to have flowing amongst those other important areas that we have obviously undertaken through the disciplined innovation processes. But if we get into the design thinking to really free up people's thinking, and then we lead them through that process where they all have a voice, where they actually can be taken to new and exciting places they haven't actually imagined yet, it stretches them. And that's when you do start to get that hothouse, you get a hothouse effect, and it becomes an incubation environment where everyone's a part of that in a hive. It's really a very engaged, connected practice. And so I've seen that with our flexible learning environments, which also enable that to happen really effectively, where one of the students got out at the very beginning of term 1, stepped right into the car park, confronted 2 teachers from 2 completely different areas, said, I think you should get together, Mr. So-and-so, so that you can work together and so that all of us students can work together so we can learn from each other. And she was talking about robotics and D&T. That's design thinking.
That's amazing. And what a surprise. I mean, how did the teachers respond to that?
I think they were taken a bit aback because they went, it's day 1 of term 2 or whatever it was, and she stepped boldly up to us and told us,
this is what we
need to be doing, and that is design thinking. And she's starting to get them thinking cross-curricular. And so I think that, we have our mentors and experts and leaders, and they are not all from the education sector. So these students start to open their minds, and then they take on leadership responsibility, and they start to see what their strengths are and what the future looks like. And they get passionate. They want to take that moral purpose and they want to change the world, and we need to enable that.
Totally. Nicole, maybe you can pick up on that, the importance of the student voice and in designing powerful new practice. Tell me how you've encouraged your students to be a part of this.
So within the network partnership, we each had different projects. It was all under the one banner of enriching digital technologies in the school. And a byproduct of an ethnographic survey that we sent out to all of the network schools came student voice. So it came, the students were articulating that they wanted more say in not only what they learnt, but how they delivered their evidence of learning. And that really drove our project. So what it looked like in the school was that, as Keren said earlier, we are sometimes dealing with long-held beliefs about the way students should learn with some teachers. So we had to really let our teachers know that they had permission for the environment to look messy, for the kids to be noisy, for things to be looking a little unconventional for a while we worked out the way that this would work for our students and for our parents and our teachers. And that was something that we really pushed as a network as well, that not only were the teachers feeling safe in that space, but they knew what we were. As leaders in the school, we encouraged it, and when we would go into classrooms and we would be asking students about their learning, the engagement that we saw and the connection to what they were learning about was so strong that we saw the benefits of the conversation and the fact that their environment started to change. The teachers were a little more dynamic in the way they delivered the curriculum and a little more, strategic in how they used their classroom. So that's something we're exploring further as a network too.
It's good. Keren, maybe you can summarise that input from students in this whole new design.
So I think there's a brand of design thinking that is quite simply co-design. And that's how do you think about and involve young people and parents, community members, elders, whoever it might be, but particularly privileging the voice of young people right from the beginning of any discipline innovation process through to the end. So the work that the schools have undertaken as part of the Innovation Partnerships work has very deliberately begun with ethnographic interviewing, generating user insights, the creation of personas, not of individual young people, but of types of young people whose needs are not necessarily being completely met in school, by involving young people in the ideas generation phase in our workshops. We've traditionally done that as adults, but we've encouraged people to go back to school and run ideation processes and do the ideas synthesis and analysis process back in schools. Doing live testing, prototyping is a way of testing out our ideas in live form to learn quickly, to fail fast, to succeed sooner, as our colleagues at IDEO say. And in order to do live testing of anything in schools, you have to involve young people, you have to involve other teachers, you have to involve parents. So
how long do you try something for?
It really depends on the nature of the idea. We've seen pop-up prototypes that have run for 30 and 60 minutes through to some of the schools that were interested in, developing entire integrated unit planning tools that needed to run for a term across multiple classes. And I think that is the benefit of prototyping, is that it's not a pilot where you're locked into a specific period of time and thinking about what outcomes you need to generate. It is really about, with users, end users isn't not the friendliest of terms, but with young people and other teachers, putting these things to test in classrooms and seeing. And that could be from a 10-minute conversation about a concept for what a new school report could look like, through to running a term-long integrated unit in a class.
How do you know when something has worked and equally when something has failed?
So I think one of the trickiest parts of not just innovation but all of our improvement efforts in school is not just thinking about the end goal and evaluating ultimate outcomes, but thinking about what are the proxy measures along the way, whether we know that we're on track or not. So if you think about some of the practice innovations that have been generated across the 4 schools that are here today, during the prototyping process, it's very hard to see what career learning skills some Aboriginal students at Allendale Primary School have developed when you're running a 2 or 4 or 6 week prototype. But what you can work out is by stepping one step back from that is to say, what would we see as a precursor to those outcomes? So it might be something like mindsets. It might be something about how much they're talking about their learning with their parents or with other young people. And one of the ways that we've tried to support schools is to not just think about what's that ultimate vision, that incredibly ambitious vision and set of outcomes, but what are the metrics and measures along the way to know that you're trending in the right direction.
Super. Let's talk about mindsets. You just mentioned the word of mindsets. Keeping that mindset positive is energizing. When it feels like it's going wrong, it can be demoralizing. Lynne, how do you deal with the mindset issue, the psychology part?
Well, I think for me, I'm always looking at it being a learning mindset. Like we're all about improvement, and for improvement, we need to continually work on what research is out there, keeping ourselves current. And along this process, you're going to have times when you kind of have those little falters, but you always have to kind of look forward as to where you're going, and you have to have those dialogues with your team about, yes, we're not always going to be in the best place, and sometimes, we're trying to get our reports in and we're trying to get prepared for innovation partnership showcases, and that's going to happen when you start to feel a bit down. But the reality is we are a team, and we have to kind of read those energies of the other people within our team and try to keep ourselves positive. Now, from my perspective, we need to be a learning community in our school. We need to be demonstrating that to our children, that we're learners, and that starts right at the top. If your administration team and your leadership team aren't demonstrating that learning journey that they're on and talking about their professional learning network and having educational conversations with their colleagues, then you're doing the wrong thing, because we need to kind of be modelling that all the way down the line, that we're all learners, we're all part of a process. Where the kids are going, things are changing rapidly, and things in our space are changing rapidly as well. We can't just sit where we are now and think that we're going to get the same results if we stay stagnant, because that's not what the kids are needing at the moment.
Be honest, have there been days or moments when you've thought, what am I doing? What are we doing?
No.
Oh, well done.
No, I don't know. I kind of am a passionate soapbox person, and my staff probably sometimes wish I wasn't. But for me, I'm always energised by what I'm reading and what I'm researching. So I get so much positive back from it, and I've got such a wonderful team, or I've got such wonderful teams working within my school, whether it be my team that's working with digital technologies, or my team working with STEM, or my literacy teams. Or my talented and gifted teams, they energise me. I get so much back from them. Yes. So I find it really easy to keep staying positive, because I've got such brilliant teams working in the school.
Very good. What about you, Lisa? Is it the same?
Obviously, positive mindset or growth mindset. I mean, we've got 7 teachers in their first and second year of teaching. So there's a young workforce supported by an experienced workforce in the school, and I think you become energised. I would agree with Lynne. You become energised by seeing those teachers excited about it. I mean, the 7 people that have dressed up in costume or done something quite radical with their hook to hook their students into a project this year has been inspiring. And as you walk around the school, you see their energy, and you become energised by it.
Look, this is not meant in any way disrespectful to any of you, but you're not new to teaching, so you've done it a while. I want you to just get a flavour for. Was that polite enough? I was very conscious of saying the wrong thing there. It was okay, wasn't it? Yeah. All right. I'm really curious to know that sort of yesterworld and the today world, and the difference between the two. How energised in comparison to how sort of, if you like, it was heavy before.
Oh, I think it comes back to passion. Like we're passionate. I think you and McIntosh's comments this morning, where you had to write down 6 words. I find that really hard to write 6 words to describe yourself or describe what sort of leader you are or person you are. But the passion that you have for the kids. I mean, Lynne's comments earlier about Keren's comments are about we're doing the best we can for the students every day. We turn up. Life's about turning up. Stephen Baxter, the Deputy Director General, always says, life's about turning up at things.
But you were doing that before. You were doing that before you were turning up. So why is it different now?
I don't know. I just think that the community. Every parent wants the best for their kids. There's no doubt about that. Every person, every mum, dad, carer turns up in the school. Some with not a lot, and it's our role to make sure they've got the best that they can. And the project-based learning work we've done, the engagement of students across the board has given us that energy. I think it's just different in our mindset. I think we're just letting go of some of the traditional ways of teaching, and we're looking at more contemporary ways of leading, and we're getting some great results from that innovative work.
I think too, they're just not so content focused. There's context focused now, and they're getting that STEM mindset. So the skills they need for the future are all there. And so with that kind of problem solving approach and that ability to think about those digital skills and be agile, and the social skills and become empathetic.
So just tell me a bit more about that content v context, because I think it's a really nice summary of this. Content is kind of the old world where it's here, have as much as you can.
Yes.
Context is much more about how you apply it in our world today. Is that right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
spot on. So that is a big shift, because they're in a connected world, like they're millennials and zennials, however you want to look at it. And so if we're going to help them navigate that, then information and knowledge are ubiquitous. We used to teach them a very confined area. That was pre-industrial. You drop the knowledge into them, and we're the experts. We provide that as teachers, talk and chalk. But nowadays, the students can actually outsmart us if they want to, and they can go on to Watson and use, simulated intelligence and they can research it, and Watson can beat human beings in a quiz type competition. But we want them to be empathetic learners, and we want them to be able to use their imaginations and creativity. And so we're unlocking that in ways that utilise more of their critical, creative thinking. And then they've got skill sets that are these future skills, the 21st century skills they will need, and therefore they are freed up to be agile. And it's not their mental ability, it's their mental agility. And that's what's in popular demand with that skills gap, and where they need to be able to be facilitated so that we can actually see their natural ingenuity. And I guess that's why people like Anthony Albanese, who's an important minister, he's the leader of the opposition, walks through the school and says, I haven't seen this much excitement in schools, and I go all over Australia, and he's astounded by that. And it isn't just the students, the staff are excited, the community, industry partners, university, everyone's really part of that for outcomes for the students driving it forth. And
is it very noticeable, very visual? I mean, if we were to walk in as strangers, we would see this very clearly?
Well, I can tell you that when we were in the Learning Environments Australasia conference, these international as well, architects and designers and educators turned up as they went to come into the STEM build, which is an amazing build. And of course, as architects, it's attractive and alluring to them. But what was more important to them was they said, this is just as shell, even though it's probably the best we've seen. They were really impressed, very flexible spaces, everything modern learners need. But they said what impressed them was they saw engaged students, committed teachers, and as they walked up to the doors, the students all had the doors open, were welcoming them in. And so, we were sort of all vying to talk to the minister, and the students wanted to talk about their just startups and their startup concepts and ideas, and they wanted more time with him. Before the minister left, he was interviewed by the media students. They filmed him. He said, wow, this is probably putting me through my paces. And so they're using their sets of talents and skills and stretching. And that's what we want. We want the stretch. And therefore, they know they can do it. They get that sense of agency and you can do it. And then there's just no putting lids on them. It shifts those expectations. And we see their hearts and their minds engage. And then bingo, they become empathetic, like caring, compassionate people, and that's where building good citizens as well.
Fantastic, that's beautiful. Nicole, what about that idea of innovation and discipline? How do you put those two together? Because sometimes what we're hearing is that kind of freestyle approach and co-designing and letting things just emerge and what have you. I need to know how we can put a bit of discipline around it, because schools like a bit of discipline.
Yes, and that's certainly something that teachers find, I think, the most difficult when they're in an innovation project, whatever it is that how are we monitoring, how are we making sure we're accountable for our students' learning? And that again has been where it's constant reflection. So rather than reflecting at the end of a unit, it's a weekly check-in. It's seeing how we're going and what did we notice about that when you did that activity today? How did you make sure that the kids were learning what you needed them to learn? How did you differentiate for them? So to keep the discipline in there, we always went back to best practice. And we linked it with innovation. I think that was probably the biggest success across the network, as well as we always came back to our core job is teaching and learning and growing young people in all facets. How do we make sure that we're engaging them in their learning and keeping innovation a priority, but we're still covering what we need to cover and making sure we're ticking all the boxes? And
do you feel that you're doing that well, or still getting there?
I think we're always still getting there. Certainly over the journey we've grown a lot in our understanding of how to do that, but it's an ongoing process, and it's something that, again, we've put in our business plan moving forward for how we can raise the quality of what we're doing and how we can refine our processes to keep innovation a flurry around, but keep that core nice and strong for all our students.
Would you say you're kind of pioneering a new world from an education world that we knew and got used to a new education world that is very much geared for the 21st century? Is that too bold?
Maybe. I don't know if I should say yes or no here. I think at any time throughout history, people think they're pioneering in something.
Yeah.
At the moment, what we have found is that teachers are more open to exploring new ways to help students learn, because they're recognising there's a greater difference between their sets of beliefs and values and what our students are coming through with. So there's a real cognitive dissonance there that they're having to master, and that's probably where our biggest journey will be moving forward in education.
Keren, do you think we're in this murky phase of, taking a step out of an old world into a new world, and we're sort of trying to work out what this new education world looks like, and as a result, it's quite murky as that mix of the two?
The only constant is change, isn't that the saying? So I don't know, I was a student when there was unit curriculum, I taught when there was outcomes-based education, and now there's a West Australian curriculum. So I think that for us that are in the education system, there is constantly change. I think what I've seen over the past few years working with schools, not just in Western Australia, but around Australia and internationally, is that there's a broader thinking and rethinking of what the purpose of education is. And I think that that's a lot driven by the values that people hold and the beliefs that we have about what every young person should be entitled to, especially those of us that work in the public school system. But for all young people right across WA, I don't think it's exclusively there. So I think that might be something that feels like those kinds of questions are being discussed more now than they ever have before. I haven't actually been teaching for that long, contrary to your prior statement. But so I don't know, people in the audience might say that, well, we've always been talking about that. That's not been my experience, having been a teacher, a school leader and a policy maker. And it's definitely something that I hear conversations about, all of the time these days. And I think that might be the thing that's different. What is our raison d'etre? What is our reason for being?
Absolutely. Let me, with time running short, let me just ask you a fundamental question, which I think is really important to everybody who's involved in this. How rewarding is it for you to see that impact that you're having as a result of taking this bold leadership? And maybe you can start with that, Lynne. How satisfying is it on a daily basis? How successful do you think students are becoming?
I think as a leader, we kind of can stand back and actually look at that, whereas teachers are kind of right in there at the coalface actually doing it. But we can kind of swan in and swan out of classrooms and actually see the excitement and the buzz. And we can see the changes that it's actually bringing to students' engagement in some subjects can come across as quite dull if they're done in a certain way, but if we can put some innovative practice in there, we can actually get kids so energised by things that they actually see career possibilities there, which they may not have picked up on before. So for me, that's what it's all about. I love the fact that I can walk into a classroom and know that I've kind of worked with some teachers and they're doing some amazing things in the classroom, and they're inspiring students to think creatively and not just go through the motions, but actually be engaged in their own learning and having that passion for what they're doing. And I see that passion in my teachers every day when I go through their classrooms, but I see them actually having that impact on the students and the students kind of reflecting that passion back at us. So, and that's what it's all about.
If I was to walk into one of those classrooms, what would it look like?
For me, they're not quiet classes. There's chit-chat going on, there's lots of discussion going on. There's often times where there's silence, but there's lots of group work happening. There's teachers actually stimulating discussion rather than leading at the front. So for me, it's all about the students being the main instigators of their learning. They've got more control over it than what they ever have in the past, I believe. And I think teachers are kind of facilitating and guiding and directing, but students have got a lot more control. And that's ultimately what you want. You want students to have that ownership of their learning and be wanting to learn more and wanting to move forward and be passionate.
That's lovely. Lisa, what about you? How rewarding do you find it? Very.
Totally agree with everything that Lynne has said in terms of the student aspect. But also, for me, it's also about the staff. I've seen young teachers just flying, absolutely just doing so well in their career. As a result of the 2-year project, I've seen teachers become outstanding leaders. I've seen teachers really step up to be leaders. They want to jump on the train. They want to be part of the success. So it's actually been able to also communicate that to your school board, to your P&C and to your wider parent community and to other schools. I think it's the biggest highlight is being able to share that success across other schools, other networks, but also across the state. So inspiring for students, but also for staff.
That's nice.
I'm going to tell two very quick stories because it illustrates that in a very succinct way when it comes to the rewards. Now, my community is very low SES, highly disadvantaged, disenfranchised, and there was a real sense of hopelessness. And I think people expected that our students would be down the road in the meth labs down at Camillo, but now we've got them up working on chemistry in our STEM labs. But I think two quick stories are that one of the students...
Making the stuff, yeah?
Well, people who know my school know that's not an understatement. But one of the students who, this is the academic extension side, was present and student voice part of the Director General of Education's ICT visioning workshop with NOTOT. And we were working alongside this student, and he was taking the VR, AR and showing it and explaining it to lots of staff around the room because he was one of the only students in the room. And then while us adults were talking, I noticed that he'd done his Diamond 9. It was all done and numbered and ready before we had to do it, all projected ready for the Director General. And then at the end of the whole day, he was back doing robotics in our STEM lab, and he said, "Is that what you adults do all the time? I'm really tired." So energised. Another quick story is talking the other day to Kim Beazley, our governor. He made a comment and I had to respond. He said, "Oh yes, but you can't do anything with the FASD." I mean, really? I said, "I can give you an example right now of a student who has FASD, and he's gone from our EASE class, low literacy and numeracy, Aboriginal boy, who was actually very entertaining and talking through the STEM and STEAM to our ministers visiting. But I said, he's actually transitioning into mainstream, and he has gone from, I had to say it, 24 suspensions last year to 2 this year, and he's gone from 75% attendance to 98% attendance. And he is now being transitioned to go into mainstream. That wouldn't have been thought possible. And I just looked at the governor's face and I thought, that is good. He really actually looks
well done.
Surprised, genuinely, that you can help every child. So that's the reward.
Fantastic. Nicole, final word.
I guess for us, as well as the benefits for the students and the teachers in terms of being in an innovative space, it's about, as a network, the collaboration that's come because of the network project, and the fact that even though we're in different contexts across the primary schools and high school, when we came together, we recognised that there were so many commonalities between our schools and so many things that we could really connect with, and that's really strengthened our network. And I know moving forward, it's completely changed the way we're going to operate as a network in terms of things like school development days and staff meetings, where we've recognised the real benefits of collaboration across schools. Because in schools, we tend to be so busy, we're very insular, our heads are down, we're focusing on what we need to worry about with our students. And it's been really nice to move beyond our context and see what other schools are coping with and how well they're doing in different areas.
Fantastic. 5 wonderful leaders inspiring us this afternoon. Please show your appreciation to them all. Thank you. That was great. Thank you very much for your open honesty and sharing some of those positive stories. As I said, we're not going to come back in here, so make sure you take everything with you. Can I also let you know that the slides, the filming, all that will be hopefully available for accessing next week. There's quite a lot to process, but from next week you should be able to lay your hands on some of that and watch it again or look at the slides again for reminders. There is also coming out later today that wonderful opportunity for you to do your feedback. And this has been a big culmination of all sorts of great elements. So it really is helpful if you could fill that in and email it straight back whilst it's still hot, whilst it's still fresh, whilst you still know that the guy who was up here was a pain in the arse. Just do it then. I hope that you've all had a wonderful 2 days. You've still got another hour and a quarter or so to go, but I won't be able to say goodbye to you. But thank you so much for making this such a fun couple of days, and it's been totally inspiring. Thank you. Okay, and on that note, you may now go. Dismissed. Dismissed.